Before we get right into things, new combat footage has been shown, so unfortunately some stuff has to be added into this video. I'm going to be putting annotations or trying to make adjustments where I can. We've gotten roughly 2.5 minutes of combat and open world exploration footage since the second main trailer for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was shown. Now with all this footage we can get a good understanding of the way that combat's going to play, and it's absolutely crazy. Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasil. Welcome back to another Xenoblade Chronicles 3 video. This time we're going to go about just over every single aspect that we've been shown related to combat so far, whether it's from the main trailer or if it's from any of the follow-up videos that Xenoblade JP have previewed on Twitter. Their daily releases were a part of why this video took a while, because I wanted to wait and make sure we've gotten pretty much all of the crumbs that we're going to be getting this time around. One last thing I want to bring up is that in all of the footage we've been shown so far, the highest level we've seen was level 33 for a character. And if we're going to be going off the trend of the previous games, Xenoblade Chronicles X excluded, that's pretty early on in terms of leveling. Xenoblade Chronicles has always had pretty quick early game leveling, followed by moderately slower leveling around the middle of the way in, so this could mean that there's still a lot of additions to combat gameplay that we've yet to see. I mean, some abilities in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 weren't even unlocked until the post-game. In short, I wouldn't be surprised if we haven't even seen the half of it. Takahashi has previously said that he wants combat to evolve with every game, and well, that's well and truly showing. So with that said, let's get right into it. First things first, we're going to be talking about the UI, or the user interface, when we're in combat. On top of our opponents, we have on average around 6 party members to keep track of, with an additional unit sometimes being shown. Not sure if they're going to be guests or unlockable at some point. We'll just have to see. Blades may have been on screen in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but they didn't do all too much, and this time around, all of our party members are going to be doing things, so we need to be able to keep track of it all, and the UI is going to be assisting us with this. Now, at a glance, this interface clearly takes more inspiration from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but there's some exceptions that I'm going to get into. In fact, for the most part, combat seems to be from 2 as a base, with some aspects of 1 implemented, and then further worked on. To start off, the left wall of the screen highlights our character portraits, the character's current role, as well as the usual, their name, their level, current health, health bar, and EXP bar. There's also a purple bar below that EXP bar, although I'm not quite sure what it indicates. There's speculation that this is a weapon EXP bar separate from our own character levels, similar to how Cross leveled both as a character and as a specific class in Xenoblade Chronicles X. More on this later. Character portraits were a feature of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and on top of looking pretty good, they also served a second role, and that was to show tension. Think of it like if you got consistent hits and dodges, and you played off the time button prompts correctly, your characters would get accuracy up, crit up, dodge slightly better, and do a bit more damage overall. Well, that was replaced in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 seemingly by the affinity system, where drivers were tethered to their blades and then certain combat bonuses were applied whenever a set level of affinity was reached. The third game, however, so far shows no signs of either, but maybe some similar kind of system is at play between characters that can interlink with one another maybe, or maybe it's just some hidden system we can't see hidden in the menus or something like that. To the right of the character bars are the buffs and debuffs that are going to be present during some of these fights. Nothing too special, it's just another everyday part of RPG life. You get damage up or defense down, or evade up, evade down, poison, sleep, evade, you know, the usual. Next up, when it's time to interlink, character duos have their portraits link up and a new portrait and bar appears. They appear to have no health bar, and instead the new bar is a grid that slowly accumulates over time with a warning symbol above. This is obviously some sort of timer that will limit the amount of time you can spend in combat in the Ouroboros form, and it remains to be seen that if this can be activated more than once per battle. It also remains to be seen if the units that have been interlinked can take any lethal damage at all while in their Ouroboros form. If anything, I expect that taking damage probably will build up the warning bar faster and give you a shorter interlink window. Last bit on the Ouroboros stuff for right now is that notice that all of the paired units that interlink with one another are adjacent on all of the trailers. Even in the open world swap mechanic that we can get a glance at, the characters all have the same lineup. This makes me think that we might not be able to switch the lineup to a way that we would prefer as a player. Maybe if later on in the game everyone can interlink with one another, crazy as it can sound, I know, but it is a possibility, and we might be able to change the lineup at that point. But that's just my own thoughts, so let's move right on. Now that we've talked about our characters' info, let's talk about the enemies' info. In the upper middle screen, the health bar of the enemy the main player is targeting is accessible to view, along with their respective level, and very nicely this time around, so is their enemy type. You can see that the Kevis Trooper shown here is represented with a person in a soldier's hat, indicating that this is likely a humanoid type of enemy. Other kinds that we've seen are aerial, aquatic, and mechanical. And something I'd also like to point out quickly is that on the top right of the screen, you can see a skull with a number that seems to indicate how many enemies you're currently in combat with. You can see in the clip here where the group is fighting against the Kevis units that the number is 1 until Noah steps in range of the mechanical enemy, and the number goes up to 2 as what I presume an aggro arrow targets Noah. As with previous games, there are indications for whenever the enemy is notable as a story boss or as a unique mob. A step above common regular enemies are lucky enemies, new additions to the series. Not too sure what being lucky will imply, but they can be noted by the sparkles on their nameplate. If I had to guess, they would probably give something like double XP and double drops on any items they carry. One step above lucky are story enemies, denoted by these blue curved wings like this heavy Brog. This is also a good image to show that buffs and debuffs will be present on the enemy portrait below their health bar, and that effects like break and topple will be set on the left of their health bar. Unique enemies have flaming wings on the sides and a timer to help highlight just how long you've been in combat with said unique enemy. You can also see a flaming effect all around the enemy bar that could also either be a part of the unique enemy nameplate, or it's maybe the indicator for when an enemy is in an enraged state. Whenever a unique enemy falls in battle, a tombstone will appear in the area they were defeated, so if you ever want to fight that guy again, simply walk right up to it, click OK on the prompt, and it will respawn the enemy for you. This was a much celebrated feature that originally premiered in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I'm more than happy to see it here again. It wasn't directly confirmed by Nintendo, but a handful of screenshots have confirmed that they are indeed returning. Another thing to note is the green punctuation sign. If this is going off of prior games, as I think it is, this will be popping up whenever the next part of the break topple line of effects can be applied to the enemy. One last thing of note is that when an enemy uses abilities, their name is going to be replaced with the name of the ability for the ability's duration, so that we could see and observe and react as needed. With both character and enemy info covered, it's time to actually talk about what we're going to be doing in combat, and we're going to be starting up with initiation and combat basics. Initiating is going to be the same as it's been. You have the choice of engaging them by either targeting a mob and starting combat yourself, running into the enemy and having it aggro you first, and while not shown, I'm going to also presume that you can bait enemies from the range, something that's been present in the previous games. Enemies can be attacked from all directions, and in fact some abilities gain bonuses depending on what direction you strike from. There isn't a part of the screen that seems to tell you if you're on the sides or the back, but it's often pretty clear based on your own position relative to where the enemy's facing. Movement then is intertwined with auto attacks, but they have a massive upgrade over both of the preceding games. The auto attack combos of 2 are back with an absolute bang. First off, you don't have lowered movement speed when your weapon's drawn, already big considering that movement was cut significantly in 2 while you were fighting. On top of that, there's a new quick move mechanic where you can quite literally quickly move either to the left or to the right, as we've seen so far, to reposition yourself. Significantly reacting to positionals is going to be that much quicker. This is absolutely incredible. Lastly, on the topic of auto attack combos, they are indeed back, but with a twist. It used to be that every time you moved, your auto attack combo in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 would reset. It wasn't ideal for getting the multipliers on the last part of your third part of your auto attack rotation, but players quickly began exploiting the reset anyway as a way to accrue arts recharge and use your abilities quicker and much more efficiently. Along with the changes to arts recharge made in this game that I'm going to be talking about later, there wasn't much of a need in this game to be able to stutter step your character and keep spamming the first auto attack over and over again, it seems. So to that end, movement no longer resets your auto attacks at all, which I think is fair. You can move for several seconds at a time, but your character will continue along their auto attack rotation. It remains to be seen if using an art will reset the rotation, or if you'll simply have to remember what the animation is when you get into your auto attack rotation. So especially if you're auto attack canceling, and the other multipliers and all of that are going to be in this game like they were in 2. Auto attack's done, let's move on to arts, the main meat of how we'll actually be doing damage and getting stuck into the fight. Let's talk about what arts actually do first. So on top of doing damage, they often have passives that can activate if an objective is complete, or will have something that has a chance to be applied, like debuffing the opponent or giving your character a buff on use. Arts are also how tanks are going to mitigate damage or draw aggro, or well, how a healer can heal. Among the abilities arts can perform is the art combo, a staple of the series that's existed in the prior titles. Xenoblade 1 and X had to use a break art, which you could then follow up with a topple, knocking the enemy down, so then you could follow up with a daze attack to stun them into place. Meanwhile, Xenoblade 2 saw this shaken up by removing daze entirely and instead giving you the opportunity to launch the opponent after toppling them, and then follow them down with a spike art to smash them down back into the ground and shake a few items loose out of their pocket. In the footage we've seen so far, we can confirm that both routes are in this game. You will have the agency to go for a daze or go for a launch and spike after toppling the enemy, which is going to be huge if, say, dazed enemies will take more damage for some amount of time, while a launch and spike enemy will continue to drop items after being spiked back down to the ground. I love the openness and choice that we are going to be presented with. With the basics of arts and the arts combo talked about, let's move on to the actual art palette that we'll be seeing in the combat UI. The art palette on the bottom is almost identical to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, with some pretty definitive changes. First up, arts come in either circle or diamond appearance, and while we aren't quite sure the reasons for that just yet, there's one very big implication that fans have so far picked up on that I'm going to get into in just a little bit. Now, arts require energy to use and charge up every time you auto-attack like in the previous game. However, there are also clips where using an art built up energy for other arts. It's only been shown twice so far, once when Mio's attacking the Brog seen here, and here again when Noah in Mio's Ouroboros form is fighting this aerial enemy. My personal hope is that this means that all arts can help to charge up other arts, but in the back of my head I'm also thinking that if characters have affinity charts like they did within 2, the bonus art recharging may be some form of ability unlocked from investing into their affinity chart, or maybe from a pouch item, something like that, and it maybe extends into their Ouroboros forms. There's more to this that adds to my doubts. The circular arts that are on all of the Keva's units so far don't seem to recover and instead seem to charge over time, similar to the arts in the first Xenoblade Chronicles game. While I personally had no qualms with the system in the first game, I can understand a lot of players' frustrations with having to wait around for an ability to come back off of cooldown, especially when we've seen the Agnian characters be able to just recharge and get their abilities up and running again very quickly. But you have to remember that in the clip that tipped us off on these charge over time circular arts, the characters were only level 12, and it is way too early to conclude that this is what combat is going to be like. It's like saying the way combat is once the team gets to Torrigoth in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is going to be the same way that combat was going to feel like for the rest of that game. Absolutely not. It's way too early, we don't know any of the systems, and so rather than doubt and swear to not play off some of the characters if they're going to act like that, I'd rather just wait and see how much else combat is going to improve. Now for the arts themselves, and this can get a little complicated as well. We can see on the bottom right that there are 3 base arts and a larger ability that seems to be a special. On the bottom left, we have the button to start an interlink with a level underneath that will probably rank up over time to make our Ouroboros form stronger in general perhaps, but there's also 2 other abilities on the top and right spots. There's also a 3rd spot down below which may indicate that we're going to unlock this slot later on in the game. These are arts that other characters have. A prime example of this is the wide slash ability on the left hand side while Noah is played here, and then while over here we can see it's actually Mio's ability. What's just as interesting is that the ZR button, which uses a technique called fusion, seems to activate arts on both palettes at once. Slowing this part down, you can see maximum voltage and ground beat linked together, and the same for giant swing and sword strike. If I had to guess, this will probably use the animation of the art on the right, while adding a damage multiplier and the extra effects of the art on the left, on top of the effects of the original art. To make this crazier, the tactics menu has a few more options for us. On top of the callouts which have been in every single Xenoblade game, focus mob, follow the leader, fight as you like, etc., there seems to be either the option to swap to a different set of abilities on the left palette, and even crazier is the fact that in this game, Monolith Soft has confirmed we have the power to change which character we control while we're fighting. This was confirmed by Xenoblade JP on April 28, as the swap operations feature, that we're going to be able to switch operations at any time while we're out in the open or while we're fighting. We've been shown character swaps on the overworld, but not yet in combat. And combat is where it's going to get crazy, because pulling up some tweets from Luxon, who did the math work on this, thank you very much, we're going to be having 6 regular arts accessible to the controlled unit at once, plus their special, plus their 3 fusion attacks, and that's spread over 6 characters. And we're going to add to that the 3 Ouroboros forms having 3 arts and a special, and that gives us access to 72 different arts that could theoretically be used at any single point in combat. This is the most control over combat we've ever gotten. For comparison, playing as Rex in New Game Plus in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you would achieve up to about 26 abilities at any point, and both Shulk and a Xenoblade Chronicles X unit who had a skill on standby could only use 16. This means that you have almost 4 times the options as compared to 1 in X, and almost 3 times the amount of 2 at its peak. Again, and I have to stress it, it's the craziest and most freely controllable combat system we've seen from Monolith Soft yet. And that's only going to go up if guest units like the Napon or Valdi or Xeon or whoever else can also be controlled by the player character at that respective point in the game. I mentioned the Ouroboros forms in there, and sure enough, by pressing Interlink, you pair up with the partner your controlled character is interlinked with, and the art palettes swap out. The left is going to have a new cancel ability, while the right has those 3 new arts and a new special. As I mentioned earlier, the Ouroboros forms take no damage, but there's a bar seemingly indicate how much time you can spend in that form, and I wouldn't doubt it gets shorter the more damage you take in that form. Note here that the tactics menu is still available to use while interlinked, but even more interesting is that so's the chain attack in the right hand side, suggesting that we can get in on a chain attack while we're in these powered up forms. So let's talk about chain attacks then. These used to be the windows of time where combat would slow down to a halt and the player had the choice to link up abilities together into powerful combos that would then benefit from multipliers. On top of that, when we used to finish off an opponent through a chain attack, known as an overkill, they also gave bonus rewards like double XP. While I hope that that last part's still applicable, chain attacks are entirely different this time around. Activating Chain Attack unlocks a tactical points meter on the top right of the screen alongside a portrait of the character you're controlling. That unit seems to have their own special animation and have a completion bonus passive effect. So maybe if you can earn enough tactical points before the chain attack window is fully closed, the passive is going to take effect for the remainder of that window. And as for tactical points themselves, they seem to be earned from meeting combat objectives while the chain attack is active. On top of that, each of the characters seem to have their own base TP contribution, indicated in the bottom left of the screen. But again, I'm not entirely too sure. Mio's 25 TP disappeared almost immediately in this clip when she started attacking, and we can see the 25 pop up right in the middle of the screen, so maybe it's just a base TP applied when that character gets their first hit in the chain attack. We can see Noah use a new special called Brave Assault at the end of this chain attack, playing off of a damage multiplier. If the multiplier is in some way affected by the accrued tactical points, that remains to be seen. The overkill mechanic has returned as shown at the end of Noah's Brave Assault ability, so this is where my hope is that we're going to see bonus rewards come out for finishing in a chain attack again. Now, while I've talked about how combat looks, let's talk about the roles each character has in combat itself. We've seen at least 9 different weapons in combat so far, 11 if you count other characters we've seen in the trailer, and there are 3 distinct roles in combat. The holy trinity of JRPGs and even MMOs, I am talking about attacker, defender, healer, or offense, tank, support. At their base, Noah and Senna will comprise the role of attacker, Lance and Mio as defender, and Uni and Taion as healers. As with all games like this, you want defenders holding the enemy's attention or aggro, while the attackers dole out the damage and the healers patch up all the boo-boos that spring up. Attackers have high burst and can draw aggro pretty quickly, so it's important for defenders to be able to consistently use abilities that are going to generate aggro and use mitigation to lessen the damage that they take when they're getting slapped around by the monster. To that end, you can see that this blue circle is going to be centered around defenders like Lance in this very first clip, and units that stand inside are going to be offered bonuses like defense up, so we may have scenarios where we're going to need to use the tactics menu to order all of our group to fall back onto a defender to survive a huge AoE, or something like that. As their name implies, healers, heal, and they can provide buffs for their team as well, and usually some debuffs on enemies too. Healers also have the unique role this game of being the only units that can rescue or revive a unit that's fallen in combat. This is the first time where reviving a character is going to be a healer-specific only ability, and it doesn't seem like you need to sacrifice some of your chain attack gauge like in previous games to revive them. Interesting choice for sure, but it's a move that's definitely going to make healers much more viable and potentially necessary for some fights instead of just getting thrown out later on in the game. Sorry, Charla. As for these roles themselves, it's unknown if there's going to be requirements like at least one of each role active in the party, but there are two important things to note here. The first is that all weapons can be used by any character. It's a point I've highlighted in my previous video, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of it in the clips in this one, but there was one very key point in a more recent clip that you might not have caught on. In this clip that focuses on lands, we can see very early on that Noah and Mio are using Noah's weapon type at the exact same time. This means that we can potentially have something like 1 defender, 1 healer, and 4 attackers all running around with Noah's sword, or maybe have 4 tanks using Mio's twin rings dodging around left and right, or heck, maybe it just, caps at 2. But again, that's something that we just don't know, and it still shows that combat is going to have a high level of variance in this game. And that's just about everything we know about combat as shared with us from Nintendo or gleaned from looking at the footage we've gotten so far. Thank you very much for watching. This video was an absolute blast to work on. I loved analyzing all the combat we're going to be messing around with come July. Do you have any of your own thoughts that you wanted to bring up and share with me, or is there something you maybe interpreted differently? Let me know in the comments below. You can also reach out to me on my Twitter, where I'm far more active on a daily basis. I plan to keep doing Xenoblade videos, so if you enjoyed this one, consider subscribing to my channel, where I'm going to be making more of these videos as we get more and more info on the game, and eventually maybe some footage of the game when it's actually out. Thank you very much for your time, and as always, have a great day.